2 Chronicles chapter 26. All the people of Judah chose Amaziah's 16-year-old son Uzziah to succeed his father as king. It was after the death of Amaziah that Uzziah recaptured Elath and rebuilt the city. Uzziah became king at the age of 16, and he ruled in Jerusalem for 52 years. His mother was Jecoliah from Jerusalem. Following the example of his father, he did what was pleasing to the Lord. As long as Zechariah, his religious advisor, was living, he served the Lord faithfully, and God blessed him. Uzziah went to war against the Philistines. He tore down the walls of the cities of Gath, Germania, and Ashdod, and rebuilt fortified cities near Ashdod in the rest of Philistia. God helped him to defeat the Philistines, the Arabs living at Gerbal, and the Ammonites. The Ammonites paid tribute to Uzziah, and he became so powerful that his fame spread even to Egypt. Uzziah strengthened the fortifications of Jerusalem by building towers at the corner gate, at the valley gate, and where the wall turned. He also built fortified towers in the open country and dug many cisterns because he had large herds of livestock in the western foothills and plains. Because he loved farming, he encouraged the people to plant vineyards in the hill country and to farm the fertile land. He had a large army ready for battle. Its records were kept by his secretaries Jehiel and Maaseiah, under the supervision of Hananiah, a member of the king's staff. The army was commanded by 2,600 officers. Under them were 3,07,500 soldiers able to fight effectively for the king against his enemies. Uzziah supplied the army with shields, spears, helmets, coats of armor, bows and arrows, and stones for slinging. In Jerusalem, his inventors made equipment for shooting arrows and for throwing large stones from the towers and corners of the city wall. His fame spread everywhere, and he became very powerful because of the help he received from God. But when King Uzziah became strong, he grew arrogant, and that led to his downfall. He defied the Lord his God by going into the temple to burn incense on the altar of incense. Azariah the priest, accompanied by 80 strong and courageous priests, followed the king to resist him. They said, "Uzziah, you have no right to burn incense to the Lord. Only the priests who are descended from Aaron have been consecrated to do this. Leave this holy place. You have offended the Lord God, and you no longer have his blessing." Uzziah was standing there in the temple beside the incense altar and was holding an incense burner. He became angry with the priests, and immediately a dreaded skin disease broke out on his forehead. Azariah and the other priests stared at the king's forehead in horror and then forced him to leave the temple. He hurried to get out because the Lord had punished him. For the rest of his life, King Uzziah was ritually unclean because of his disease. Unable to enter the temple again, he lived in his own house, relieved of all duties, while his son Jotham governed the country. The prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, recorded all the other things that King Uzziah did during his reign. Uzziah died and was buried in the royal burial ground, but because of his disease, he was not buried in the royal tombs. His son Jotham succeeded him as king. 2 Chronicles chapter 27. Jotham became king at the age of 25, and he ruled in Jerusalem for 16 years. His mother was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. He did what was pleasing to the Lord, just as his father had done. But Unlike his father, he did not sin by burning incense in the temple. The people, however, went on sinning. It was Jotham who built the northern gate of the temple and did extensive work on the city wall in the area of Jerusalem called Ophel. In the mountains of Judah he built cities, and in the forests he built forts and towers. He fought against the king of Ammon and his army and defeated them. Then he forced the Ammonites to pay him the following tribute each year for 3 years: 3,400 kilograms of silver, 1,000 metric tons of wheat, and 1,000 metric tons of barley. Jotham grew powerful because he faithfully obeyed the Lord his God. The other events of Jotham's reign, his wars, and his policies are all recorded in the history of kings of Israel and Judah. Jotham was 25 years old when he became king, and he ruled in Jerusalem for 16 years. He died and was buried in David's city, and his son Ahaz succeeded him as king. 2 Chronicles chapter 28. Ahaz became king at the age of 20, and he ruled in Jerusalem for 16 years. He did not follow the good example of his ancestor King David. Instead, he did what was not pleasing to the Lord and followed the example of the kings of Israel. He had metal images of Baal made, burnt incense in the valley of Hinnom, and even sacrificed his own sons as burnt offerings to idols, imitating the disgusting practice of the people whom the Lord had driven out of the land as the Israelites advanced. At the pagan places of worship on hills and under every shady tree, Ahaz offered sacrifices and burnt incense. Because King Ahaz sinned, the Lord his God let the king of Syria defeat him and take a large number of Judeans back to Damascus as prisoners. The Lord also let the king of Israel, Pekah son of Remaliah, defeat Ahaz and kill 120,000 of the bravest Judean soldiers in one day. The Lord, the God of their ancestors, permitted this to happen because the people of Judah had abandoned him. An Israelite soldier named Sikri killed King Ahaz's son Maaseiah, the palace administrator Azrikam, and Elkanah, who was second in command to the king. Even though the Judeans were their fellow countrymen, the Israelite army captured 200,000 women and children as prisoners and took them back to Samaria along with large amounts of loot. A man named Oded, a prophet of the Lord, lived in the city of Samaria. He met the returning Israelite army with its Judean prisoners as it was about to enter the city, and he said, "The Lord God of your ancestors was angry with Judah and let you defeat them, but now he has heard of the vicious way you have slaughtered them. And now you intend to make the men and women of Jerusalem and Judah your slaves. Don't you know that you also have committed sins against the Lord your God? Listen to me. These prisoners are your brothers and sisters. Let them go, or the Lord will punish you in his anger." 4 of the leading men of the northern kingdom, Azariah son of Jehunan, Berechiah son of Meshilmoth, Jezekiah son of Shallum, and Amasa son of Hadlai, also opposed the actions of the army. They said, "Don't bring these prisoners here. We have already sinned against the Lord and made him angry enough to punish us. Now you want to do something that will increase our guilt." So then the army handed the prisoners and the loot over to the people and their leaders, and the 4 men were appointed to provide the prisoners with clothing from the captured loot. They gave them clothes and sandals to wear, gave them enough to eat and drink, and put olive oil on their wounds. Those who were too weak to walk were put on donkeys, and all the prisoners were taken back into Judean territory at Jericho, the city of palm trees. Then the Israelites returned home to Samaria. The Edomites began to raid Judah again and captured many prisoners. So King Ahaz asked Tiglath-Pileser, the emperor of Assyria, to help them. At this same time, the Philistines were raiding the towns in the western foothills and in southern Judah. They captured the cities of Beth Shemesh, Ayalon, and Gederoth, the cities of Soko, Timnah, and Gimso, with their villages, and settled there permanently. Because King Ahaz of Judah had violated the rights of his people and had defied the Lord brought trouble on Judah. The Assyrian emperor, instead of helping Ahaz, opposed him and caused him trouble. So Ahaz took the gold from the temple and the palace and the homes of the leaders of the people and gave it to the emperor, but even this did not help. When his troubles were at their worst, that man Ahaz sinned against the Lord more than ever. He offered sacrifices to the gods of the Syrians who had defeated him. He said, "The Syrian gods helped the kings of Syria, so if I sacrifice to them, they may help me too." This brought disaster on him and on his nation. In addition, he took all the temple equipment and broke it in pieces. He closed the temple and set up altars in every part of Jerusalem, in every city and town in Jerusalem. He built pagan places of worship where incense was to be burnt to foreign gods. In this way, he brought on himself the anger of the Lord, the God of his ancestors. All the other events of his reign from beginning to end are recorded in the history of the kings of Judah and Israel. King Ahaz died and was buried in Jerusalem, but not in the royal tombs. His son Hezekiah succeeded him as king. 2 Chronicles chapter 29. Hezekiah became king of Judah at the age of 25, and he ruled in Jerusalem for 29 years. His mother was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah. Following the example of his ancestor King David, he did what was pleasing to the Lord. In the first month of the year after Hezekiah became king, he reopened the gates of the temple and had them repaired. He assembled a group of priests and Levites in the east court of the temple and spoke to them there. He said, "You Levites are to consecrate yourselves and purify the temple of the Lord, the God of your ancestors. Remove from the temple everything that defiles it. Our ancestors were unfaithful to the Lord our God and did what was displeasing to him. They abandoned him and turned their backs on the place where he dwells. They closed the doors of the temple and let the lamps go out, and failed to burn incense or offer burnt offerings in the temple of the God of Israel. Because of this, the Lord has been angry with Judah and Jerusalem, and what he has done to them has shocked and frightened everyone. You know this very well. Our fathers were killed in battle. Our wives and children have been taken away as prisoners. I have now decided to make a covenant with the Lord, the God of Israel, so that he will no longer be angry with us. My sons, do not lose any time. You are the ones that the Lord has chosen to burn incense to him and to lead the people in worshipping him." The following Levites were there: from the clan of Kohath, Mahath son of Amasai and Joel son of Azariah; from the clan of Merari, Kish son of Abdi and Azariah son of Jehaleel; from the clan of Gershon, Joah son of Zimna and Adin son of Joah; from the clan of Elizaphan, Zimri and Jewel; from the clan of Asaph, Zechariah and Mathaniah; from the clan of Heman, Jehuel and Shimei. From the clan of Jeduthun, Shimei and Uzziel. These men assembled their fellow Levites, and they all made themselves ritually clean. Then, as the king had commanded them to do, they began to make the temple ritually clean according to the law of the Lord. The priests went inside the temple to purify it, and they carried out into the temple courtyard everything that was ritually unclean. From there, the Levites took it all outside the city to the valley of Kidron. The work was begun on the first day of the first month, and by the 8th day they had finished it all, including the entrance room to the temple. Then they worked for the next 8 days until the 16th of the month, preparing the temple for worship. The Levites made the following report to King Hezekiah: "We have completed the ritual purification of the whole temple, including the altar for the burnt offerings, the table for the sacred bread and all their equipment. We have also brought back all the equipment which King Ahaz took away during those years he was unfaithful to God, and we have rededicated it. It is all in front of the Lord's altar." Without delay, King Hezekiah assembled the leading men of the city, and together they went into the temple as an offering to take away the sins of the royal family and of the people of Judah. And to purify the temple, they took 7 bulls, 7 sheep, 7 lambs, and 7 goats. The king told the priests, who were descendants of Aaron, to offer the animals as sacrifices on the altar. The priests killed the bulls first, then the sheep, and then the lambs, and sprinkled the blood of each sacrifice on the altar. Finally, they took the goats to the king and to the other worshippers who laid their hands on them. Then the priests killed the goats and poured their blood on the altar as a sacrifice to take away the sin of all people, for the king had commanded burnt offerings and sin offerings to be made for all Israel. The king followed the instructions that the Lord had given to King David through Gad, the king's prophet, and through prophet Nathan. He stationed the Levites in the temple with harps and cymbals, instruments like those King David had used. The priests also stood there with trumpets. Hezekiah gave the order for the burnt offerings to be presented, and as the offering began, the people sang praise to the Lord, and the musicians began to play the trumpets and all the other instruments. Everyone who was there joined in worship, and the singing and the rest of the music continued until all the sacrifices had been burnt. Then King Hezekiah and all the people knelt down and worshipped God. The king and the leaders of the nation told the Levites to sing to the Lord and the songs of praise that were written by David and by Asaph the prophet. So everyone sang with great joy as they knelt and worshipped God. Hezekiah said to the people, "Now that you are ritually clean, bring sacrifices as offering of thanksgiving to the Lord." They obeyed, and some of them also voluntarily brought animals to be sacrificed as burnt offerings. They brought 70 bulls, 100 sheep, and 200 lambs as burnt offerings for the Lord. They also brought 600 bulls and 3,000 sheep as sacrifices for the people to eat. Since there were not enough priests to kill all these animals, the Levites helped them until the work was finished. By then, more priests had made themselves ritually clean. The Levites were more faithful in keeping ritually clean than the priests were. In addition to offering the sacrifices that were burnt whole, the priests were responsible for burning the fat that was offered from the sacrifices which the people ate, and for pouring out the wine that was presented with the burnt offerings. And so worship in the temple was begun again. King Hezekiah and the people were happy because God had helped them to do all this so quickly.